So there's this cool little phrase that people give that's about life management skills. You might have heard it. Our priorities set our schedules. It's basically the idea if you say what you want to do, but what your schedule is what you really want to do. That's what your priorities really are. For example, Friday night is coming up, and you got a million voices tell you what you should do on Friday night. Some voices say, it is Friday night, yay. If you're not having all the fun in the world, you are just a loser, man. Or there are other voices that say, Friday is the best day to rest. Or in my case, I have the little voices saying, ah, as I'm trying to pour water on them to give them their baths because they get baths on Fridays. The point being, there's competition. How do you decide what you should spend your time on Friday? Which voice do you listen to? The call for relaxation, the call for fun, the call for the immediate needs? Or maybe best, what will bring me the greatest joy in eternity? You're like, this is Friday. What does Friday have to do with eternity? The wisest man who ever lived says it does. That our moments matter for eternity. Now, remember Ecclesiastes, if you were to sum it up in 2 words, probably 1 word. If you were to guess, if anyone want to guess, what is the 1 word that describes Ecclesiastes? Vanity. The word vanity, though, probably could be best described as soap bubbles. Here for a second, gone. They look pretty, but they're empty. And the whole book is basically trying to say there is hope. There's a lot of futility, there's a lot of pointlessness, but there is hope in decisions you can make. The section right before this in chapter 6 is the middle of Ecclesiastes, and it's actually the middle of his argument that life is kind of messed up. There are problems, we try our best, and then guess what happens? Things don't go right. Some of you need to be told this, that you believe that life is great. It is really as good as it could be, though in 2020 that would be very strange, but I'm sure there's still some people who are like, psh, like I'm still doing great. But I'm thinking New Testament all of a sudden here. Solomon, the old dead guy, who was wise beyond his years, says, no, this life will leave you disappointed. Every time in this year we've thought things were going to get better, something new, unexpected shows up. So how can you choose what is best while we wait for Jesus to return? That's the question we're going at here. Now, he has told us that enjoying life is a gift from God. You should enjoy life. But how do I enjoy life? Here, he gives us practical proverbs. This is like the nitty-gritty of life. How do I practically enjoy things? How do I live it correctly? Now, these deal with some of the actions and the attitudes that we need. For example, very clearly, I'll summarize it in 3 phrases. Be around the dead, watch out for fools, and be patient. Which is so against our world today. To be around the dead, to watch out for fools, and to be patient. Now, there are 2 paths in here. If you're taking notes, you'll see the 2 paths we get there. The 2 paths to keep you on the straight and narrow year to year. How we should set our priorities. And verses 1 through 4 breaks out that you must remember you will die, so you must live fully now. We got to remember you're going to die so that you can live fully now. Ecclesiastes 7, 1 through 4. If you haven't already turned there, read along with me. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools in the house of mirth. Verse 1 explains this idea. He gives this idea that a good name is better than looks. Your good name is worth more than your looks. It's better than precious ointment, the day of death than the day of birth. Whenever you're trying to study Ecclesiastes or other wisdom books of the Bible, you have to kind of notice the poetry. And this is a better than comparison. It's kind of a poetic way of comparing one thing to another. And it's trying to convince you, basically, do what's best. Pick the better thing. It's worth more, right? And in the ancient Near East world, your name meant everything to you. It's what people thought of you, what they called you behind your back. Like, Buster. Man, Buster's a great guy. He always comes through. Well, but Janet, she's such a flake, right? She only hangs out with me when she can get something from me. And the rest of the time, she ignores me. So Proverbs 22:1 says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. A good name is worth everything. Similarly, ointment here, don't think ointment as like a cleansing, like soap. It's not soap. It's more like oil that would go on the wealthy as a covering. Because no one wants to look like drab and dry. It was moisturizing for their skin. And he's basically saying the problem with perfume or ointment, the problem with fancy clothes, is it can cover up whitewashed tombs, like the Pharisees. What is more important than how you look? Your reputation. What people think about you. Worry about your reputation, your consistency more than your looks, because the day of your death is better because your reputation will be sealed. Generally, I say generally because sometimes we find out things, but generally, when someone dies with a good reputation, that is sealed in history and it only gets better. For example, think of all the ways, the legends that have grown up around George Washington or Martin Luther King Jr. Like, these guys have become super saints. And then suddenly you read a real history book about their life, and you're like, oh, like they were normal dudes who got worried like the rest of us. But we tend to elaborate, and it gets bigger and bigger, right? So people die. But on the other hand, if you die with a bad reputation, what happens? Think of Judas, right? Judas, his name comes from the tribe of Judah, Jesus' tribe, King David's tribe. But will anyone name their child Judas anymore? No, his reputation is sealed forever. But it's not just our own death that needs to be considered. We know we will die, and so work for a good reputation, but generally, second, he says, a good death is better than celebration. Verses 2 through 4, it is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Okay, just imagine, you have an opportunity. Saturday is coming up, and you have a choice of going to a birthday party. And you can pick the kind of party you would want to go to. You know, sometimes my kids have parties, they're not always my favorite, but the kind of party you would want to go to. Food, friends, games, maybe you get to bring something home, so great. Or you can go to a funeral with long speeches, crying, and the reminder that you will be up here too soon in that casket. Wisdom would say, choose the funeral every time. Choose the funeral, because Israelites loved parties. Oh man, if you read enough about Israelite history, even today, celebrations went on and on. Feasting involved large dinners, there was lots of thanksgiving, lots of prayers, remembering what God had done. A house of mourning, though, was your own home. They didn't have churches, and they wouldn't do services in synagogues. They'd do it in their living room, where someone would die, and they would bring professional mourners who would come into their homes weeping and crying and moaning. Usually there was somebody who would give a long speech about the dead person, like David did for Jonathan and Saul when they died, just making a poem describing how great they were. And we should rejoice at the gift of life. Every birthday is an amazing time for Thanksgiving. But one idea he pushes on us is to remember, I too will die one day. Jim Winter, writing on this, says, the passing of a loved one cuts us to the heart, but often it is the surgeon's scalpel that removes the cancer of false promise that keeps us under the sun. The wound may be deep, but if we listen to the voice of God, we will meet the one who was wounded for our transgressions. Isaiah 53, verse 5. It is this reality that we will all die. So he says, it is better to be sorrowful, angry, disappointed, than to be laughing. The word sorrow just means strong emotion, the feeling you get when someone you love dies. It's not easy. And our world will tell you, make that feeling go away. Medicate it, run it off, work it off, do something. Don't feel bad. But Solomon says, sorrow produces happiness for eternity. Laughter can distract. Sorrow attracts our attention to what matters. That laughter distracts, but sorrow attracts. It attracts our attention to what matters. The wise man remembers his death while the fool goes on saying, I'll just live forever. He eats delicious foods, the mirth that he's talking about, to keep that truth away. Because death reminds us of what is important. Now, we live in Orange County. We don't have too many blizzards down here. But you can know, you go up to the mountains, right? Big storm rushes through. Blizzards are extremely dangerous, especially when you're outside and when you're tired. Hypothermia comes against your body as your body gets literally, all the heat is sucked out of from any exposed skin. Any skin, the heat is being pulled away. If your neck is exposed, the blood going to your brain goes slower and slower. It's cooled rapidly, and so you start to get sleepy because the blood going to your brain is now cold. And all you want to do is lay down and sleep as you trudge along in the cold snow. Many people describing being in blizzards like this, fighting against hypothermia, said the only thing that kept them going was the memory, if I stop moving, I will die. And so they keep trudging along. They keep moving, trying to get to safely, even if it's only a step at a time. Now, some folks will tell you, oh, well, you drink alcohol, right? Drink alcohol to keep warm. It makes you warm inside. But actually, all it does is it slows down your brain so you don't feel the cold anymore. Life is like a blizzard sometimes. It's a blizzard of confusion. Solomon has been trying to remind us that even when it doesn't feel that way, that's actually what it is. It's just because you've had too many sips of the pleasures of life that made you no longer feel how desperate your situation really is. We need the realization, I am going to die one day, and I don't know when that is. And it should give us the motivation to live for Christ today. Jonathan Edwards wrote when he was a young man in Resolution 22, resolved to endeavor to obtain for myself as much happiness in the other world as I possibly can. I am going to try and get as much joy in heaven as I can by my actions today. So if you want a life that matters for God, if you want a life that will bring joy in heaven, remind yourself. Step one, Step one is to remind yourself, you are going to die. And that realization is not giving up on living. I know some people take that of, oh, I'm going to die, and so I might as well just give up. No, no, no. This reminds you that what you do today matters for eternity. Because you don't know when eternity is going to start. You can't just wait until, like, oh yeah, now it's finally time to start getting ready for eternity. It could be at any moment. Every time you see sickness and death, every time you see that little ticker on the deaths from coronavirus go up, is supposed to remind you that sin is in this world. Sin wants to rule you, and eventually, sin will claim you through death. Young people specifically are notorious for thinking they'll live forever, but instead, we should all be living for the day that we die. Not in a morbid way, but sober thinking. We will face judgment. So for a Christian, death is still painful, but we know the next step is just trusting God, and then we will see him face to face, and it will all make sense. So step one, knowing you're going to die. Step two, then, choose your different options. Whether it's Friday night, the house you will live in, what you will say yes to, what job you will take, where you put your money in investments, ask the question, what pleases God? What will allow me to obtain happiness after death? Because that lasts a lot longer, right? Every plan we make, it could come to an end. But what am I doing that is investing in eternity? First point Solomon makes here. You're going to die. Prepare for death. But he brings up another issue here, that if you try and realize that, there are forces at work that are trying to distract you, trying to make you foolish. Secondly, you must believe folly will tempt you to not hear wisdom. We know the wisdom says you will die. Secondly, you must know that folly will tempt you to not hear wisdom. Verses 5 through 12. This is all a section on warfare training. It's know your enemies so you can fight against them. And he gives 4 attacks that folly tries to go after us with. Folly tries to distract us from the truth with 4 separate attacks in verses 5 through 12. Verse 5 through 6, folly is going to try and distract you. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is laughter of fools. This also is vanity. Oh, he gives the description of what's going on here. Rebuke, right? Rebuke is a strong phrase against something you've done wrong. And songs are praises, so it could be someone singing songs about you. Oh, how magnificent you are and all the great things you've done. Or it could just be entertaining music, something you like. And notice the idea here, the fool is plural. There's a whole lot of voices singing these foolish songs. The wise is singular. One wise voice, many foolish voices. Let's be honest. No one likes to be told they're wrong. Even if you ask for it, you're like, have I done anything wrong? You don't really want to be told yes. You want to be told, no, it's okay, but like we not that we don't mean that, but it still hurts. Rebukes hurt. And there are so many people who will give us praises, who will tell us how great we are. But verse 6 gives the reason why. Why should we not listen to them? He says, the songs of fool will help you because, the songs of fools will not help you because it's like cooking with a fire of leaves. I love Ecclesiastes because it gives such cool images, right? He says, it's the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This also is vanity. Think this way, if you're trying to cook, I don't know how many of you have tried to cook in the wilderness. You go out and camping, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. I like to backpack, it's been fun. And you put down a fire, and you get some leaves, and you burn them. And the cool thing about leaves is they look pretty as they burn. They have little shapes, different colors. But the problem is leaves burn up, and they're gone. If you want to roast marshmallows or cook real food, you cannot cook them on leaves because they burn up right away. You need something stronger. You need wood. In the same way, unspiritual songs are sometimes fun. It's okay to sing Let It Go, except if you're the father of little girls and they sing it 30 times in a row. That gets a little bit hard. Or, Hey Jude, or any other song that you love. Those are okay. But to find actual enjoyment in life, you need songs that are more substantial. We need songs like Come Thou Fount, which we sang earlier. It's prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. In Proverbs 27:6, Solomon writes, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. We want to have our friends be willing to rebuke us, to stab us in the face, because they care, because that stab is not an attack, it's a scalpel. And sometimes our friends need to come from the hymnal at times, where we sing the old songs that remind us of who God really is. Now, the first attack, we just saw, that's the distraction. The second attack is a little more direct. The first attack just tries to make you feel good. The second attack tries to corrupt you. Verses 7 through 8, folly will try to corrupt you. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. The preacher here is showing vulnerability that exists of wisdom without character. See, character is important too. Character is the strength to do what you believe is right, even when there's opposition. The phrase there, oppression, who says, oppression drives the wise into madness. Oppression can mean hardship, toil, persecution, government regulations, people on the job telling you this or that, neighbors saying, are you that kind of Christian person? And nothing draws the attack of fools like wisdom. For example, think today. If you go to your politically minded friend or neighbor and you tell them, the best way to convince someone is really, I want to describe my opponent's view in a way that they would agree with. The best way to relate to them is to say what they believe in a way that they would agree with, and then say, here's why I disagree with. Fools will get mad at you, like, no, we need to get angry about them, and we need to attack them because how evil they are rather than their ideas. Fools try and break you down. Madness, right there, is actually a verb. The Holman Christian Standard Bible gives a really good translation of this passage where it says, the practice of extortion, not exhortation, extortion, turns a wise person into a fool. Say everyone has a breaking point if you keep letting them attack you. If we don't shove them away and say, no, I will not listen, they will break us down. Maybe it's not breaking you down through an attack. Maybe it's breaking you down through bribery. They're giving you something. Bribe corrupts the heart. It's a payment that convinces the wise judge to lean one way But I'll be honest, I suspect for many of us, you and me here, it's not money. Like, we have enough money. I don't think we really, if someone offered us money, we wouldn't just say, forget it. But the real temptation, the actual wealth that people offer us, is friendship and recognition. See, cosmetics entrepreneur Mary Kay Ash, you all know her products, she put it this way: there are two things people want more than sex and money: recognition and praise. And that is the danger, is someone who will bribe you with recognition and praise. But we fight it back against the folly with the same strategy as before. Verse 8. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. How do you fight back against corruption, briberies, persecution? Remember, the end is coming. Remember, you will die and face the living God. Or think of it another way. No one cares about the middle of a race. They only care about the finish line. Yeah, no one cares what place you were in the middle of the race. I guess maybe if you were like way in the back and you sprinted ahead, then they cheer you all the more. But it's the end of the race that matters. Middle of life. People talk about midlife crisis. It doesn't matter what your middle of the life is. It matters how you end. In Ecclesiastes 12:14, the end of the book says, God will bring every deed into judgment, every secret thing, whether good or evil. So, brothers and sisters, be patient in the midst of pressures and persecutions and briberies. Don't fall for the short-term lies. Be patient for the long-term result. I'm right there too. I am not a very patient person. And so often, if I don't see instant results, I'm like, what is the point of reading my Bible, of praying? What is the point of doing good deeds to my neighbors? They still mad at me. Like, what do I do? It doesn't matter. Long-term view. Eternity is at stake. Now, all that prodding to manipulate in other ways brings out folly. And so, he gives a third line of attack. Folly will try and get you to react foolishly. Folly is going to try and get you to react foolishly. Folly is coming with attacks, and in verse 9 through 11, it tries to get us to react. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. I don't remember who said it first, but a phrase has gone around, I've heard it a number of different times, that machines react, people respond. Or at least they should. Like machines just, you put the pressure on, they always react the same way. People respond in wisdom to the situation. And the temptation is to respond in anger. He says that be not quick in your spirit to become angry, because anger lodges in the heart of fools. There's this lie that anger is worth it. Proverbs 29:20 says, do you see a man hasty in his words? Is he quick to say something harsh? There is more hope for the fool than for him. Proverbs 29:20. See, anger finds its fuel in impatience and pride that is seen in verse 8. When we get impatient, when we get prideful, anger is quick to develop. But the reason that we should fight against expressing our anger, no matter how you feel, is because it shows you to be a fool. We talked about this morning, anger is also a statement of murderous desire towards the person in God's eyes. But yeah, there are a few cases for righteous anger. It's rare though. Instead, most of our anger is a rejection of God's control and a call for me to be the most important person in the world. I need to be in the center. It needs to happen my way. And he says, the problem is with anger, it doesn't just come and then fly away. It doesn't go in one ear and out the other. No, it goes in and lodges itself into your heart. It's not like food poisoning, not to be graphic, but think of food poisoning. You get food poisoning, you feel really sick, and it's gone. No, anger is like heartworm that digs into your gut and sets up home and starts laying eggs, creating more and more and more. Anger is dangerous because it only grows. And one of the dangers of it is it actually can make you foolish as it takes more control. It might be hidden from most people, but the foolishness will come out. God, on the other hand, is slow to anger. In Numbers 14:18, describing himself, God says, Yahweh is slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. If you want to be more godly, if you want to be more impressive, you want to be more like God, be slow to anger. Now, I don't know if it's true, but I'm told that typically anger is a temptation of the young, that we who are young get angry quicker, that those who have been around longer start to learn a little more patience, not across the board, that's what people say. But one thing that tempts all generations the same is this response of, hey, the old days were better than today. Right? We could all say this temptation to respond by saying the old days were better than today. Verse 10 says, say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Ouch. It's amazing how much our past experiences affect us today, right? Just think. Imagine something you loved from your childhood food, a childhood activity, or if you didn't become a Christian in this church, imagine the church and the practices in that church that you had in your first early days of Christianity. And how those define us, right? This is the way church should be. This is the way that rice pilaf should be made. This is the way that hot dogs should be cooked. And especially when we come from different cultures, like we can have strong opinions about that. Like, what do you mean rice? Do you know how many varieties of rice there are? Like, this isn't rice. Our old days mentality. And the problem that Solomon is bringing out here is when we think of the past, we tend to only have selective memory. Things get filtered through a grid, through pink glasses. We remember it being so good. For example, I'll give this one. Recently, I was watching with my girls one of those Disney sequels. Some of you are familiar with that. Okay, so not commenting about Disney or anything. I just remember when I was a kid, I watched this Disney movie, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I thought it was better than the original. It was so good. Then I watched it with my kids, and I'm like, actually, this is really bad. Like, not even just like the message was bad, the quality was bad. I'm like, why did I think this was so good? Nostalgia. It has its power. It affects us, and we don't think of that. So, Solomon had it centuries ago, millennia ago. Be careful not to react to life with folly. Be careful not to say, I need to get angry, or it needs to go back the way it was. But instead, God has you right where you are supposed to be now. You are exactly where God in His sovereignty wants you to be. You don't need to be angry. You need to respond by faith. You don't need to have things back the way they were. You need to have things the way God would have them. And the past wasn't always as good as we remember it. And we saw folly, the strategies of folly. It tries to distract you. It tries to corrupt you. It tries to make you foolishly react. And then the fourth, folly, tries to steal your inheritance. Verse 11 through 12. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, for an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money, and the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Inheritance was a really big deal to those in ancient Israel. Inheritance, of course, is possessions and wealth passed on from a parent to a child. But today, usually, you get your inheritance when you are in your 60s or in your 70s and your parents die. Both your parents are gone. Everything, you have to work with your brothers and sisters and split up everything that was theirs and figure it out. Some people it happens younger, some older. But back then, it was more like in your 20s. In your 20s, you had nothing. All you had was training. You learned how to do some stuff. You didn't own anything of your own. And then here at 20 years old, you are given property. You are given tools. And this was the only way a person survived, was getting what was their parents to them. But inheritance without wisdom is dangerous. Inheritance without wisdom is dangerous. Hold your finger here and go back to chapter 2, verse 18 through 20. He talked about the vanity of toil. He said, I hated all my toil in which I toiled under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to a man who will come after me, his son. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all that which I told, and use my wisdom under the sun. This is vanity. It's pointless, because it would be like, okay, my parents don't have a Ferrari, but let's say they did. I actually have a friend who's letting his 18-year-old son drive his Ferrari around. But a little crazy. Imagine giving the keys to mom and dad's Ferrari, and I don't even know how to drive. Never used a stick shift in my life. And I try and get into that thing and take it out. What's going to happen? I'm going to ruin a very expensive car, right? In the same way, this is what he is saying, that money is good. Inheritance is beneficial. But money gives you help. Wisdom helps you keep it. Money gives you that help. Like, it's a benefit. What generational wealth blesses us so immensely. But it is wisdom that helps you keep what those who have come before us. It's like animals. Lions. It's so interesting because we think of lions as being this ferocious creature, and it roars, and you take off running, right? Problem is, if a lion roars, their lunch goes running away, and they have to run after it and burn a lot of energy, and often they don't catch it. So lions are actually not that fast, but they'll hunt in two ways. They'll sneak up on an animal, and they get around behind them. When they're not looking, they pounce and take them out. And the rest of the herd runs off, but they have their meat. Or they'll go to a watering hole where all the animals come to drink, and they'll hide in the bushes, and they'll wait. And they'll wait and wait until the animals start drinking, and then they'll pounce as well. Folly is like a lion. It doesn't come up to you and roar saying, "Hi, I'm Folly. I want to devour you. Will you let me?" And I think too often that's what we assume the way of the world would be like. The way of the world would never actually seem nice to me. But folly is very patient and slowly approaches you and tries to convince you it has the best version of life. It makes you numb to the problems, or it wears you down, or it tricks you and then devours you. See, to live a good life, we must focus on the purposes of God. So, brothers and sisters, the way we do that is first, watch out for folly. Choose the better of what is available. We have to listen to serious truth. Avoid those who constantly pressure us. There are bad friends out there who are trying to take us away from Christ. Bad voices, news, media, things that distract us. Don't get angry with life. Watch out when it comes to trusting wrong ideas. Watch out for picking always your preferences versus God's word. Ecclesiastes is a book all about the wisdom of knowing judgment is coming. That's the whole theme of the book. Judgment is coming. So we will die and face Jesus allows us to live wisely now because you don't have to fear anyone else. Jesus is the one that matters. And we know that there is a great enemy whose tactics are being used against us to try and keep him from our eyes. In 1873, Horatius Bonner wrote about this difficult journey that is the Christian life. He explained that life is not supposed to be easy. And he wrote, "The road to the kingdom is not so pleasant and comfortable and easy and flowery as many dream. It's not a bright, sunny avenue of palms. It is not paved with triumph, though it is to end in victory. The termination is glory, honor, and immortality. But on the way, there is the thorn of the flesh. There is sackcloth, and there is the cross. Recompense comes later, but labor is here." He said, rest later, weariness here. Joy and security later, but here, endurance and watchfulness. The race, the battle, the burden, the stumbling block, and oftentimes the heavy heart. Too often in America in the 21st century, we are used to this idea that things should be comfortable, that trials are short and joy is everything in between. But the Bible and church history says differently. There will be many trials. There will be many temptations and difficulties. The reason we endure is not for what we get now. The reason we endure is for when Jesus comes and says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So make the choices that will get you that well done, that bring glory to God. And I don't always believe it either. But we must keep reminding ourselves, it will all be worth it. Join me in prayer. Father, I have trouble believing this so often. There are so many things that seem so much better, that seem, Lord, the distractions consume us. And we don't want to be aesthetics, as has already been talked about in this book. Lord, those who say that no joy is allowed, everything needs to be tough and rough and spiritual. Lord, you want us to be very physical, to be earthly, but in a way that is building for joy. And so, Lord, we pray for that wisdom to do so. May we often be around death and remember that death is only a reminder to us that we will die. Heaven is waiting. So, Lord, allow us to continue to do good works for your glory and the good of others so that we might be blessed. To the praise of your name, Jesus. Amen.